Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast, and we are looking at some more best bets here in the NBA playoffs. 2 more games on Thursday as we roll quite along here after a pretty interesting Wednesday night. I know the kids are feeling good here after another solid day there. Went about 8-1 on the day total, 5-0 in those best bets that we had yesterday. Obviously, a same game parlay in there for me and also a player prop. But we do have plenty of other sides and totals here for you guys to look at. So want to make sure to subscribe to that page. Also check out the player props video we're bringing you each and every day now moving forward throughout this postseason. And use the prop finder tool up on thelines.com. Really handy chart to see all the odds right in front of you from these books that are giving us bets. Make sure you get the best juice on everything that you are putting down. Nate, let's go ahead and jump right into your first best bet here for Thursday.
Yeah, Bucks team total is 102.5 now. It was 103.5. And I will take an alt total even up to 103 or 104 for some plus money here. I think in normal circumstances, in a game 6, you expect the home team to bounce back and close out. But even if the Pacers close this out, are they closing it out with defense? Are they holding the Bucks under 100 points? I think that's extremely doubtful. I think this game is definitely going over if the Pacers win. Only 214 is the game total, and I would just parlay Pacers money line and the over if that's what you're angling for. It's saying look, and that's entirely dependent on Tyrese Halliburton's health because he was not able to be explosive in Game 5, and we saw what the Bucks did, basically just bullying this team like they did in Game 1 of the series, and that's when they scored 109. The lowest total is 108 for the Bucks in the series, and even in regulation when Chris hit that late 3, they were at 108 in Game 3. And the thing is, Dame is still doubtful. Giannis is still doubtful, although Giannis is closer to returning than we might think here. But the thing is, the offense has been much more playoff oriented without Dame Lillard, with Chris Middleton at the helm. Last 3 with Dame either injured or out. The Bucks have a 122 offensive rating. That's up from 114.5. Their 3-point attempts are down about 4 or 5 a game. Their points in the paint are up 13 a game, with Bobby Portis shooting 50% and scoring 23 a game in the 2 games he was not ejected. And then Chris Middleton carrying the offense even without Bobby. He's averaging obviously 32, 5.5 assists, 120 offensive rating. That's the type of way you score in the playoffs. That's also the way you score on this Pacers team. A Pacers team that allowed the fewest 3-point attempts and the 6th most paint points at home post All-Star break. They had the number 12 defensive rating, but they still allowed 113 in today's fast-paced NBA. They played fast, as we know. And the Bucks at Indy in games 3 and 4, even when it slowed down in the fourth quarter, they had a 127 offensive rating in the fourth. So still getting points on the board with Chris at the controls there. 118 offensive rating for the game. Shooting 57% on twos, getting inside, getting free throws. Indy can be vulnerable, very vulnerable, in fact, in terms of giving up free throws. So I don't see them going down that easy. But even if they do lose, I think this is a 120, 108 game where they lose. So I think it's a great way to hedge on the Bucks here.
Yeah, I think you're fine there. I do think they cover in this game. I'll just go right into my first best bet, which is the Bucks to cover 8.5 points. And I'm giving some credit to the Bucks here more than I'm really just kind of thrashing the Pacers. But I think if you think that they're going to get that amount of points, I still think their defense has shown that if they keep it slow, then they're good to go, and I did not mean to rhyme that on purpose. But the key thing here for me is what the Pacers need to do to win. And that's indicated it's indicated by the season stats in wins and losses. And in wins, everything in terms of the pace, attacking the rim, and getting out into transition is high. It's always good for them in these wins. In this series, though, it's just not been the case. So that's really what I'm looking at. The key stats here: points in the paint, fast break stuff. That's really what I care about for what I'm seeing from this team. I mean, right now they're playing at a 92 pace in this game, and it's been like every game is basically like a 92 pace. There was one like 96. There was one that was actually sub 90, but for the most part, all these games are actually right at 92, and it's just like it's a science for this Bucks team at this point for keeping this the Pacers off of the out of transition and out of the paint essentially, but and scoring obviously in the paint, which is something they're always going to be able to do against this Pacers team. In wins this season, the Pacers scored 18.5 fast break points, and losses they scored 14. The points in the paint, also a pretty stark difference there. 60 points in the paint when they win, 54 when they lose. So they're really not as good of a half-court offense as maybe we kind of envisioned at one point with Tyrese Haliburton being so pass-happy. It's like they're kind of pass-happy as long as there's so much space because the other team is not quite yet back on defense. That's when they're the best, essentially. And I think that's also correlated to why we saw Miles Turner having a little bit more success than we've normally seen him have, right? Miles Turner was a guy that was getting up a lot more shots in this playoff series than he got up during the regular season, in part because the minutes are there and he has to guard some bigs on Milwaukee, but also because there's actually a lot more half-court offense actually happening where Miles Turner can now get back down the court on offense to play that fast pace with them. But in this series, they're playing at a 92 pace. Like I said, I mean, on the season, they had the second fastest pace. It was 102. That's a humongous difference. 10 points per 100 possessions is very huge for the pace that they're playing at now, scoring 6.5 fewer fast break points and only 43 points in the paint, as opposed to leading the league with 57.9, 58 points in the paint per game during the regular season. That was number one, and they were the team that was so heavily dependent on that. I mean, we like to think of them as this like run and gun 3-point shooting team, but the reason they made threes during the regular season was volume. It wasn't necessarily percentage, and they're not able to get the volume of threes up that they might like, so they're not hitting them as well. And plus, you've got like I said, if they're not getting into the paint, and the Bucks are actually playing that well because they're back on defense before they can get that transition bucket in the paint. That's then I think they're good to keep this thing within 9 points tonight.
Yeah, I mean, and do you like any sprinkle on the Bucks money line? If you do, like, would you just take the Bucks series at plus 540? I think it is right now. I mean, I don't think the Pacers are so inexperienced that they couldn't possibly win a game 7. But I mean, clearly Milwaukee has shown that they have more chops in an elimination setting. So I mean, you'd be very much be live. I mean, this is similar to the Magic bet that we handed out in game 5, where like, if they win this one, they're almost certainly going to win game 6. They didn't quite win on the road, but like, yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a correlation where you say like Bucks money line could really be juiced up in terms of just taking them in the series, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the knockdown drag out series that we will see in the other game here, Knicks at Philly. I mean, I'm just expecting a close game here, but I'll take Knicks to win by 10 points or fewer, plus 220. And I think you can hedge with maybe half a unit on either team to win by 5 points or less. Both that is about plus 200. It's just hard to picture a blowout in this series. I mean, we've had only a couple games. I mean, the OT game ended by 6 points. That was a bit of an outlier, as like Brunson had that little turnover that led to a bigger margin. The game 3 loss seemed like an outlier due to Philly shooting in the third quarter. They shot 17 for 22, hit 9 threes. Every other quarter in that game was within 2 points. And I mean, the last 2 overall, Philly's a +1 net. So, I mean, obviously it's been very close. Now, Scott Foster is the crew chief for this game, which will bring up some interesting forecasts in terms of like, oh, Philly's absolutely going to win. He's the extender. But I mean, if you look at his numbers, like Scott Foster is pretty much 500, like road versus home team, favorite versus underdog. But just like any other ref, what he does do is not take shit from any stars, right? I mean, he's not going to, especially with the new points of emphasis on foul hunting, he's not going to give Joel Embiid these ridiculous calls that he sometimes gets. So I don't think it necessarily favors the Sixers. Like, I don't think Embiid's record is particularly good with Scott Foster reffing. But I mean, let's just look at the fourth quarter in this series. It's been +1, +4, +2, +2 the last 4. So obviously those are going to be tight. And I mean, it's partially because dudes are just wearing down. I mean, how many dudes are averaging 40 minutes a game in the series? Brunson, Hart, and OG, and Embiid, Maxey, and now Kelly Oubre pretty much up there in the last few. So, I mean, you got tired legs out there. You got low scoring. The Knicks have the longest possessions in the fourth quarter, I think, on the entire season. I think we're leaning under 200, if anything, on the total, just because of the pace in the fourth quarter and because Embiid just kind of like sputters to a halt. 1.5 points per game on 1-for-9 shooting the last two fourth quarters. And Brunson has scored as well, but he hasn't been that efficient, and he's a 0 plus minus when he's been out there. It's really on the Knicks to just contain Tyrese Maxey this time around and probably pull out a close win if they can. And I mean, will they have? They'll at least have about an even home court, it seems like, after the last game in Philly where there were more Knicks fans on a Sunday afternoon. It's not a huge road spot, but I think, you know, the Knicks, these guys are tough. Like, they're not going to hang their heads after blowing that one. I think they will go out there and grind a close win.
From your lips to God's ears. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I don't think there's any fear that they can't close out just because they, you know, had one game that they just let slip away. I mean, you could argue that there was a game. I'm not arguing that there was a game that they kind of got the calls, but I mean, Maxey shoved off. I'm not getting into that part. The point is, I think 3-2 is probably a fair stance for where this series is at. And I mean, there's probably been a few sort of like outliers in the sort of more specific stats here and there where like here, this dude's doing a little bit better. Oh, I can't believe the team shot like this in that game, whatever. But for the most part, it's been right about where it should be, which is two very, very evenly matched teams that might not be as evenly. I mean, I think the Sixers would look a little bit better. I think the Knicks have looked like the clear-cut better team, but that's unhealthy Joel, which I guess at this point is just what you expect from Joel in the playoffs anyway. So because we've talked about both games and who's going to win and stuff like that, I get to go to a player prop to finish off best bets here because I love this Ben Shepherd look. I think I found something. I mean, it's 3.5 points, and you can still get that at BetMGM, over 3.5 points for Ben Shepherd. Household name, I'm sure. If you're not familiar, Ben Shepherd is a backup guard on the Indiana Pacers. And to be honest, the regular season wasn't exactly where you would have heard of him. He's actually just been getting more minutes now in these last handful of games of this playoff series, more so than anywhere else. And I think a part of it is so Ben Shepherd's coming in getting more minutes. And a big part of that, I think, is the fact that now there's really no bigs on the bench for Milwaukee. Like, they're kind of exhausting their bigs, and now they're going guard heavy when their rotation players come in off the bench with guys like Pat Connaughton and even, you know, at this point, like Andre Jackson. There's just not quite as many like big men coming off the bench the way that like maybe Bobby Poe was giving them that big man look as their backup. Well, now he's starting because you don't have Giannis. And I know there's like a small chance that Giannis and or maybe Dame comes in. Seems like Giannis is actually like somewhat closer to 50%, and Dame is like really not likely to play. But what version of Giannis are you going to get anyway? So anyway, for Ben Shepherd, he's now been the first dude off the bench. This is really, really interesting to me. It's when you're getting subbed that's just as important as you know, like, are you getting subbed? Like, it's when are you getting some scrub minutes? Are you there to just give a guy a breather? And Ben Shepherd's been coming in with the first unit of guys. In the last game, he and Obi were the first dudes off the bench. In the game before that, he, Obi, and TJ McConnell all came in at the same time. But the fact that he sort of jumped over TJ McConnell in the pecking order. And I don't know if that's in part because TJ McConnell has not been playing, has not been shooting well at all. He's still taking his customary 10 to 13 shots a game for a backup in like 17 minutes with like a 28% usage rate for a backup point guard. Like, that's what TJ McConnell does, but he has not been hitting at all. And Ben Shepherd has been hitting really, really well, which almost scares me how well he's been hitting, because he's shooting at about 69% from the field. Nice. And about 63% from deep in these last 4 games. So in the first game of the series, he didn't get in, right? He barely played. He got 9 minutes. He had like no stats. In these last 4 games, he's played 20 minutes, 7.5 points, 4 field goal attempts, and 3 of them from 3. He's also gotten to the line in all but one of those 4 games, and a couple at least 2 free throws in a couple games as well. So like I said, the shooting is hot for sure. Like the shooting percentages are not going to hold, but if he's taking 4 shots and he's shooting 70% essentially, we only need him to hit 50%, right? I don't need him to go 3 for 4. I need him to go 2 for 4. And in fact, if he hits one of those threes, because 3 of his 4 shots a game so far are threes, then I just need him to make one of those free throws that he's been attempting at about 1.5 free throws per game as well since that time. So he is the prototypical dude to score against Milwaukee. He's very good on the perimeter. He's obviously a very good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. The Bucks will give up a lot of stuff all around the mid-range and the 3-point line. They have not been that good this season on those things. This is not like Bud's defense the way that we saw it. Like, they actually are now really, really good down low. And this is Glenn Rivers' team. They're good down low, and they're good getting back in transition, not giving up fast break points. But Ben Shepherd's getting a lot of his stuff off of that catch and shoot action because the defense gets a little bit imbalanced, right? And so if he's going to take 4 to 5 shots, which is what I project him at, I think he's still getting the 20 minutes. It seems like Carlisle's really liking him in these last 4 games in a row. Then yeah, I'm going to take him at 3.5 points. It's just need to get 2 buckets.
Yeah, maybe he's jumped in the rotation because Dame has been out on the other side, right? And you don't need as much of a defensive presence, and you don't need to play Nembhard as much or McConnell. And then you can get a guy who's just going to be a little bit of instant offense there and hit these above the break threes that the Bucks do give up. Yeah, no, I like targeting him and Obi. I expect another balanced approach from the Pacers. We talked about this like all season. They, especially at home, they can have 8 guys approaching double figures. Multiple, Halliburton dealing with the back, so he's not going to be looking to shoot as much necessarily if he is out there. But I mean, they could still even limit his minutes if he's not like extremely healthy at this point, and that would just mean more run for Shepherd, who 24 minutes in his last game. He's been around 17 to 24 all series and getting the opportunities to knock down shots.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, and we'll see what's up with Hallie. It does seem like there's still something going on. He just looks like still slightly different than he did before, really before he got hurt, obviously in the middle of the season. But that is all the time we have for you in Best Bets. Continue to follow along. Make sure to subscribe to that page. You'll also get the play-up props that we have up for you in a separate episode that we're bringing you each and every day now throughout these playoffs. So until we see you next, happy betting.